Okay, everybody, these are our online instructions for Thursday, December the 3rd, 2020. If you are either Midland Online Academy or for whatever reason you're not in this room because you're on quarantine, you're out sick, you took a day off, whatever. If you ain't here, you should be doing this. And once again, hopefully you found this video embedded in a Google form like this, which is going to have some really simple questions to it in response to the video that you are presently watching. So let's get into today's work. It says, Thursday, I can define judicial review as developed in Marbury v. Madison, and I could summarize Jefferson's domestic policy. We're going to be doing this in the digital interactive notebook. So jump on over to that classwork tab, scroll down to Early Republic. You're going to need this notebook. You're going to need these notes. So in our interactive notebook, yesterday on Jefferson, you did foreign policy. You put in a map of the Louisiana Purchase. You put his picture there and his years in office. Today, we're going to hit that domestic policy, and we're going to start where we left off with the Louisiana Purchase. Something can be both foreign and domestic. Louisiana Purchase is foreign because we negotiated with a foreign government, and it's domestic because it added to the size of our country. So we're going to start here. By the way, you should note that Jefferson is a member of the Democratic Republican Party. Make sure that goes under domestic. And you should add in there that the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States. So go ahead and type that up, pause the video, get that in your notebook. Great. So now let's talk about this. Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. His party believes that the government can only do whatever the Constitution says they can do. But there's a problem. The government doesn't say anything about buying land. The Constitution doesn't. So, how is Thomas Jefferson going to justify this? Well, let's watch this video and see.
Have you heard the one about Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Territory? Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, was not a fan of the new Constitution presented in 1787. He was very worried that the Constitution gave too much power to the new national government and not enough power to the states, an issue known as big government. Jefferson only reluctantly agreed to support it when his friend James Madison promised to propose a Bill of Rights after it was ratified. But Jefferson's fears about big government did not go away. For example, Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton proposed a national bank in 1790, and Jefferson knew there was no provision in the Constitution to permit such a thing. Hamilton claimed some sort of implied powers mumbo-jumbo. Sure, it wasn't written in the Constitution, but the Constitution implied that it could be done. But Jefferson wasn't buying it. Nonetheless, the bank was established by Hamilton and President Washington. When Jefferson was sworn in as president in 1801, he pledged to reduce the size and scope of the national government. But of course, things didn't go exactly as he had planned. Spain secretly transferred the Louisiana Territory to France right beneath Jefferson's nose. When Congress found out, they quickly began discussions with France to buy a piece of the territory along the Mississippi River for about $2 million. But there was one little problem. Jefferson knew there was no provision in the Constitution to buy foreign territory. So what was a strict constructionist to do? First, he tried to get an amendment to the Constitution passed that would expressly permit the purchase, but Congress wasn't willing to do it. Then, without permission, the U.S. negotiators in France cut a deal for all of the territory for a cool $15 million. That new land doubled the size of the nation. Now Jefferson was really stuck. He knew that the territory would be a great acquisition for the country, providing lots of new land for farmers and other settlers, but how could he constitutionally justify it? In the end, Jefferson turned to the argument used by his old foe, Alexander Hamilton. He claimed that the power to purchase the territory is implied in the Constitution's treaty-making power. This was the exact argument that he had mocked openly a decade before, so it must have crushed his pride to have to use it. But more importantly, he may have committed the biggest big government play ever. How ironic is it that one of the biggest opponents of big government doubled the size of the young country and did so while openly questioning its constitutionality?
Okay, so there you have it. Jefferson buys the Louisiana Purchase by agreeing with Hamilton that there's such a thing in the Constitution as implied powers, even though up until this point, Jefferson did not think implied powers were a thing. Hope you're paying attention. We're answering an awful lot of the questions that you've got on that Google form. Anyway, so you should now be ready to move on to the second thing that goes, again, we are in this blue column, and that is the Supreme Court case of Marbury versus Madison. And the big takeaway, we'll get into the details of the case in a minute. We've got another video. But the big thing about this case is it gets us to the idea of judicial review. The Supreme Court gets to decide if a law violates the Constitution. Now, remember, when we talked about John Adams and the Sedition Act, that clearly violated the First Amendment. But by that point, the Supreme Court had not figured out that it was allowed to overturn bad laws. They didn't know they had the power of judicial review. But in reading through Article 3 of the Constitution, they sort of realize in the Marbury case that we've got to be able to do that. How do they reach that conclusion? Well, that's another video. So here we go.
When there's a clash between a law of Congress and the Constitution, who gets to decide what's constitutional? The answer now is the Supreme Court, thanks to the principle of judicial review. What is judicial review, you ask? It's the ability of the federal courts to review congressional laws, actions taken by the president, and laws and actions of the states for constitutionality. But it wasn't always this way, and it was a confrontation that involved three famous founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and James Madison. You see, when Adams was president, he was given authority from the Judiciary Act of 1801 to appoint a number of midnight judges who were a small group of judges in the Federalist Party, which was the same political party that Adams belonged to. This would ensure that the Federalist Party controlled the courts when Thomas Jefferson, who was not a Federalist, took over as president. One of these would-be midnight judges was William Marbury, whose appointment to be a justice of the peace was never delivered. When Thomas Jefferson became president, Secretary of State James Madison refused to deliver the commission to Marbury. This was the first time that a presidential election brought about a party change in the nation's short history. So the political tensions were high. Furious, Marbury took up his issue with the Supreme Court and asked them for a writ of mandamus, basically a document that would order Madison to deliver the commission. The court did not want to get involved in the partisan dispute between the parties, but it had to make a decision about the case. The justices found the solution in establishing a principle that Alexander Hamilton mentioned in Federalist Essay number 78 that highlights the role of the courts. Chief Justice John Marshall wrote the opinion for the court, which decided first that Marbury was entitled to the commission, but more importantly, they decided that the clause allowing the court to issue writs, which came from the 1789 Judiciary Act in the first place, was actually unconstitutional. Chief Justice John Marshall then outlined the role of the courts, saying, "It is the duty of the judicial department to say what the law is. Those who apply the rule to particular cases must, of necessity, expound and interpret that rule. If two laws conflict with each other, the courts must decide on the operation of each." This principle is called judicial review, and it invalidated an act of Congress through the power of the Supreme Court. And although not in the Constitution, judicial review strongly supports the constitutional principle of checks and balances and brings about a greater balance among all three branches. For a deeper understanding of Marbury versus Madison,
Okay, so that's enough of that video. So you should, again, have this note put into this blue column. So pause the video, make sure you got it. And now that we've done that, let's scroll down in our interactive notebook to page 10. And let's do Marbury versus Madison. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom this in so it'll be bigger for you, right? So our year is 1803. And the question is, right, this is the question. And the court force Madison and Jefferson to give Marbury the judge job Adams promised. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and make that just a little bit bigger for you guys. Okay. Right. So that much that far. And here's what they decide. And by the way, we don't care that William Marbury never got to be a judge. I mean, it's been 200 years. The guy's dead. We don't care about that. So why am I making you learn this case? Because we do care about this. Okay. So here's what they rule. While Marbury should get the job, the law allowing the court to force the issue is unconstitutional. This establishes the right of the federal courts to review federal laws. And I'm going to put in parentheses, judicial review. And you need to get this. And this, guys, this is really massively important. This idea of judicial review is massively important because what this means is that if Congress passes a law or if a president passes an executive order that violate the Constitution, as John Adams and Congress had done with the Sedition Act, starting in 1803, the court says, wait a minute. If the other two branches violate the Constitution, we can stop them. And this has become incredibly important throughout the history of our country in the, what are we looking at? 217 years since then. So while the facts of the case are boring, the implication of the case is huge. So this is page 10 of your interactive notebook. Go ahead and pause the video, get these notes. Once you do, we are done for the day. So pause here, get it done. I will drop a fresh video for you tomorrow.